Hi, welcome back to Taji's World of Books, and this is my weekly reading wrap-up. Hi everyone, welcome back to my weekly reading wrap-up, and this is where I go through all the books that I got through this week. This week was kind of a tough week in that I was really busy with work and had a lot of things going on, so I didn't get through as many books as I wanted to. However, I did read 4 books. 2 of the books are quite chunky. They're like 600-page books. So that's part of the reason why as well. But all in all, I'd still say that it was a really good week. So I've done what I've done in the past, which is I went ahead and filmed a pre-clip to the series that I read, and that was for Roar. So we'll go ahead and go to that now. Okay, so I wanted to jump on and give you my thoughts. I just finished Roar by Cora Carmack. This has been on my TBR for a long time, guys. And I hadn't gotten to it because I wasn't expecting much out of it because it's a YA fantasy romance, which I didn't know. But of course, it's me. So I'm always going to pick like a fantasy romance, right? Like I'm always going to pick a romance. So guys, I was super shocked. I was like dragging my feet this morning. I'm like, I really don't want to read this. Like, I think it's going to be crap. It's not going to be any good. Boy, was I wrong. This book delivered. She delivered. And the thing I didn't even pay attention, or maybe I did like 2 years ago or whatever, because it's been on my TBR for like 2 years. The thing that I hadn't paid attention to is that Jennifer L. Armentrout writes a review for this book, and she said, Carmack shines with a unique fantasy and alluring romance. And it absolutely is. This is a very interesting story, and it reminds me, so let me set the premise, right? And if you guys have ever read Mary E. Pearson's The Remnant Chronicles, and I reviewed that a couple weeks ago, this is like a cross between the Remnant Chronicles. Like if you like that, you'll like this. The Remnant Chronicles and the 90s movie with Helen Hunt, Twister, okay, where they're storm hunters. So here's the concept. It starts off in the beginning with a princess who has been betrothed to marry a prince from an allied kingdom. Remnant Chronicles, right? Like reminiscent of that. Okay, so she's betrothed to marry him. And she doesn't want to get married, but she's doing her duty. And the first scene is that she's dressed up in this costume in her like betrothal gown and her headdress, and she can't move because she's like cinched and pinched and like puffed and buffed and all of that, and she's super uncomfortable. Okay, so she walks out of her room and she like basically runs into her betrothal, the prince, and she's taken by him. He's gorgeous, he's tall, he's handsome, he's beautiful, he's all these things that she was not expecting. And he is an utter gentleman, and he's amazing, and he's beautiful and gorgeous, and she dances with him all night, and it is wonderful, and all the things that she hoped that it would be, but never thought it could be. Fast forward, she overhears a conversation. I'm not going to say what the conversation is, and as a result, she decides, this is not for me, and I'm going to do something different with my life. The thing that we don't know is that her kingdom and her mother have been hiding the fact that she should have magic powers. And this is where the story gets interesting. The nobility are called stormlings, and stormlings can control storms. So in this world, there are very destructive storms like tornadoes and firestorms and electrical storms and hurricanes and all of like the, blizzards, all the devastating types of storms that can occur. But these storms have souls, and these stormlings can control these devastating storms by going in and stripping the soul of the storm away, and then they keep it in a crystal form. And the more of these crystals they have, the more powerful they become. She is supposed to be born with this power, and she doesn't have it. And her betrothed is one of the most powerful stormlings like ever to live. So he is very, very powerful. And so she then embarks on this journey because of a couple things that I think you need to go in blind. She then embarks on this journey with these storm hunters she didn't even know existed. There are these storm hunters who weren't born with the power but learned it over time. And so as she is with them and learning to harness a power that she doesn't think she has, she begins to develop these amazing relationships with these storm hunters, and one in particular, because of course there has to be a conflict, right? And so this is where it's like the Remnant Chronicles, where you've got a storm hunter who is alluring and gorgeous and cares for her and is just amazing, and then you've got this prince who is dark and brooding, and is he dangerous, and is he a liar, and is he, what is he? Is he deceptive? And what does that mean? And how do we save the kingdoms? And how do we save the aligned kingdoms? Because there's a storm brewing in the future that we know is coming, and that threatens basically to destroy everything and everyone. And so basically that is this story. And I was taken by storm. No pun intended. A good pun nonetheless. I was taken by storm because I wasn't expecting. I didn't think it was going to be as good as it is or was. I loved this book. I read it in a day, a couple of hours. You're able to get through it. The writing is very easy it sucks you in right away. It's interesting. It's captivating. It's a very interesting premise about these types of storms, and you find that the storms have souls, and the storms are, and they bring in this interesting concept that everything around you in this universe has souls, but they're not awakened, meaning not the souls. The souls are awakened, but people are not awakened and recognizing that these souls exist and are speaking to them on a day-to-day basis. They just are tuned out to it. And so you bring in this fantasy element with romance, with trust and deception and Game of Thrones type political maneuvering and lying and backstabbing and who's telling the truth and, you know, who has the most to gain under what circumstances. And, you know, there's a lot of like little subplots going on that you're following, but you're getting mainly the point of view of the main character, Aurora. It's her point of view, but then you also hear the point of view of the prince, and you hear what's going on. His name is Cassius, and you're hearing what's going on with Cassius, but then there is Nova, who is Aurora's best friend, so you're getting, and she is a fire witch, and you have earth witch, so a lot of magic in this world that has been built. So she's done a great job in building the world, building the story, building the mystery, building the intrigue, building the romance, building the angst that's going on, and it just is done really, really well. And so for me, this is a 5 out of 5 star, absolutely hands down, very well done. And like I said, if you like the Remnant Chronicles by Mary E. Pearson, you absolutely will love this. This gives me a Sarah J. Maas kind of, you know, Cassandra Clare, Jennifer L. Armentrout, like the type of stories that they write is what comes together in this. So I have blabbered on about this, but I just wanted to share my excitement. And so we will go on and continue with the rest of the story as I finish. I'm going to start book 2, and book 3, I'm kind of ticked, is not going to come out until July of 2021. So I'm going to have to wait a little bit. So I probably, by the time July comes around, because I read so many books, I'm probably going to have to reread this and then reread book 2. But you know what? It is going to be well worth it, and I'm all in for it. So you guys, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next clip here in a minute. Okay, so you heard my feedback on Roar, and so then I went ahead and finished the second book in this trilogy, Rage, and I have to say this book is so good, and I was not expecting it to deliver in the way that it did. It delivers in so many ways in terms of it being a fantasy romance. As I had mentioned before, it is a very unique concept in that these are storm chasers, if you will, that are learning to harness the heart of storms, and you're learning what the soul and heart of storms, what that really means, and how they capture that, and how they harness that power for people who weren't naturally born with that ability. So everything is really culminating into these kingdoms warring for power and the ability to rule. There's a destructive force that's going on that in the background, it's called the Storm Lord, and we're trying to find out this vendetta that the Storm Lord is on, and who he's against and what that all means. And I don't want to go into too much detail in this book because it is a conclusion, or not a conclusion, but the follow-up to Roar. But I can tell you that it is fast-paced, it moves quickly, the romance develops really nicely, it's really sweet. It also, the plot line in terms of when Aurora arrives back in town and she has learned to, harness her power, and we learn that her power that she has is really unique to anyone else in this kingdom, except the Storm Lord. She and the Storm Lord then share a similar type power, and she's really trying to understand what that means. There also is still the dual love interest in that the prince is still looking for her. Prince Cassius, he was fated to marry her and she was kidnapped, and so he wants to know what happened to her. And so there are still the two dual love interest, and you're still trying to understand what that means for Aurora and how things will sort of flesh out. And it does all come to a culmination in this book. Now, there is a third book in this series, and it's called Rain. My understanding is that it's taken, because I was sort of looking, and it takes the author about 2 years to come up with a new book. And I'm like, am I going to have to wait 2 years for this? Because it was taken by storm in terms of it being as good as this book is as good as it was. And apparently the author has had some health challenges, and she was diagnosed with epilepsy, unfortunately. And so that really along with the pandemic, has really put her behind schedule in terms of her writing schedule and getting the next books out. But I think she plans on releasing it. At least what you see on Amazon and Goodreads is that she's planning on putting that out in July. And so I'm eagerly awaiting, and I'm happy to reread the trilogy to ensure that this is fresh in my mind. This ended on a cliffhanger. I was like, I need more. It was so good, you guys. If you love fantasy and you love romance, this definitely delivers in all the ways. It is a YA romance, but it doesn't fall short. It's more of a new adult, if anything. I wouldn't say it's YA. It's new adult for sure. But it delivers in so many ways, and it's so good, and I can't recommend it enough, and you should check it out. Okay, so those are the two books that I finished in that trilogy. And then the next book that I read, you guys know I love Anna Todd's After. This book rivals Anna Todd's After. I'm in the process of reading it right now. It might rival, and it might be up there, and it might boot Anna Todd's After off the top of my list, because this had me in pins and needles and on the edge of my seat. So this is the story of Kiera, Denny, and Kellen Kyle. It is a love triangle. It is a college romance, in the sense that everybody is college age, but it's also a rock star romance because Kellen Kyle is a rock star. And Kiera has been with Denny for 2 years, and they decide, because he has taken another job, they have decided to move across the country, and things sort of take off from there. It is intense. It is heavy. I don't want to say too much because I want you to go into this blind. But I can tell you that this book tears your heart apart and brings it back together and leaves you breathless and leaves you wanting more and rooting for the characters and understanding the dilemma and the angst and the difficult and challenging decisions when you are put in challenging situations, when you want to do the right thing and you just can't and you don't know how. Kellen has an extremely difficult past and an abusive past, and that is revealed very early on. Kiera is young and very insecure and unsure of herself and full of anxiety and full of self-doubt and recrimination about who she is, but she's also super selfish because she's young So you want her to step up and make some decisions, but she really puts people through challenging situations because she's so daggone indecisive, and you just want to kick her and just say, stand up for what you want. Think before you speak, and don't tell somebody that you want something that you don't. Like, only be true and honest with yourself, but it's reflective of her age, and like, she just struggles with that. This book was a 5 out of 5 star. Now, this author did what I often do not like. And again, so I don't like to tell you too much. I like to tell you enough to encourage you to read it, but I don't want to go into too much detail because I want you to go into it blind like I did, because I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And when I was there, I was like, oh, you know, like it just takes the wind out of your sails and like, and beats you down and then brings you back up. It's so angsty. So this author did what I typically don't like authors to do. And I didn't realize this, so I didn't get the other book because it's 1.5, so I thought it was like a novella, and it's not. So I read it as an ebook, but I went ahead and purchased it. And it's the second book to this story, but she didn't write it until she completed the series, and then she wrote that novella at the end. Don't read it at the end. Read it now. So you read Thoughtless, then you jump to, and I'm going to try to drop a picture of Thoughtful into the story. And this is from the point of view of Cora, and Thoughtful, this that I'm going to try and drop in here, or here, so I'm going to try to drop it over here, is the point of view of Kellen. And I don't like when authors give me a whole, I like when they do chapter by chapter point of views, right? Like, so we get it all in one book. But you know, you see, this is 600 pages. It would have been a beast. And she said it was, when it was all said and done and she gave it to her editors, it was a beast. So they separated it into 2 different books. And Thoughtful is Kellen's point of view, and you need it. It is essential because you hear her side, but all the things that you don't know that's going on with him, you hear it and you need it because it brings the story to life and it helps you to really understand what's going on. And I'm glad, because I was sort of torn and did some research, and I was like, do I read it after because it was published after, even though, because sometimes it's kind of funky with authors as to whether or not they're spoilers. It wouldn't have been the same if I read it after, because I read it Thoughtless and Thoughtful back to back. It brought the story to life, and I needed his point of view to see what's going on so that you understand him so much better and you understand what he's going through and what he's experiencing. And it's like amazing, and it is a wonderful, wonderful story. I cannot recommend this enough. Like, go out and get this and read it, and it's going to be at the top of your all-time favorites, I'm almost sure. I am midway through Effortless, and I'm like, and it's starting to get angsty, and I'm like, oh my God, no. And so it is, I can't, and I haven't read anything by this author, S.C. Stevens, and I'm so glad I picked it up. Like, you got to check it out. You're going to love it, and as much as I do. So I'm going to finish up these books, and I will be back with another wrap-up to tell you how it went. You guys, if you haven't liked and subscribed, please do that. It helps me, and I'd like to know what you guys like, and it helps me to know if you're enjoying the content that I'm putting out, so thank you so much. And you guys know that I upload new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so tune in, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Thank you so much for joining me.